Hi, and welcome back to Programming with Pax. In today's video, we are going to talk about JavaScript array methods. So there are 9 different methods that we'll cover, and I know that developers that are just starting their journey sometimes struggle to know what these methods do and when you'd want to use them. And so I wanted to create this mega video that sort of compiles it all down and where we can talk about what these methods do, and then also I'm going to list a couple challenge questions for each of the methods that we will solve together. By the end of this video, you should be a lot more confident in using these methods by yourself, and also I'm going to leave timestamps in the description below in case you want to skip through to a specific method. We have a ton to cover, so let's get started. All right, so when it comes to array methods, I found it easiest to understand and remember them by knowing what they return, or really what they do. I have broken down the array methods into 4 categories. Ones that return a new array, ones that mutate the original array, ones that return true or false, and then ones that do something special. Now, inside of the script file, we have a variable called users, which is equal to an array, and inside of that array, there are a bunch of objects with different users in it. So in total, there are 10 different users, and each user has a first name, a last name, a gender, an age, nationality, and a user ID. My goal for this is to show real-world application. So let's say on your front end, you make an API request to the server and you ask, hey, give me a bunch of users. And then what it's going to return very often is an array with a bunch of different objects in it. And so as we go over these array methods, I wanted to have, applicable real-world data for us to work with. Now, before we get started, I will leave 2 CodePen links in the description down below. One will have the data and the questions that we're going to try and answer, allowing you to practice these array methods yourself, and the other will have all of the completed answers. So first up, let's look at the array methods that return a new array. So that is map and filter. And here we have the different questions or challenges that we're going to try and answer. Now with map, it takes each element from an array and transforms it with a callback function that you specify. So what that means is that it will loop over this entire array, and for each of these elements, for each of these objects that are within, it will do something with it. That's what map does. It then creates a new array of the same length with these transformed values. Let's dig in to understand it a little bit better. So we know that it's going to return a new array. So we can say const first names is equal to users, and users is the name of this whole array, all the data that we're working with, users.map, and inside of there we have a callback function. So we're going to say function, and we know that with map, as you loop over, you get access to each individual item. So with users, since that's plural and that's the array essentially, we have access to the individual user right here. And then let's finish the function. So we're going to return user.firstname. And then let's console log first names. And save. And now we can see that the new array that is returned is an array of the same length, so 10, just like the users array, except it only has the first names. Now we can clean this up, and instead of writing function like this, we are going to use an arrow function. Now I'm not going to go into much detail on the benefits of arrow functions, as I'm going to release an ES6 crash course pretty soon. Just know that it gives a more concise and modern way of writing functions. So that's the first improvement. The second thing we can do is that since this is a one-liner, meaning there's not a whole bunch of logic right here, then we can do an implicit return. So that means we can get rid of this object and we can delete the return and this object, and we can just have it as a one-liner, just like that. And if I save, we get the same values. We could take things even further. Instead of writing users here, we could actually deconstruct. So again, this is ES6, and we could say first name here. And so real quick, what deconstruct means is that instead of having the whole user object here, if we put the curly brackets here, what we're essentially doing is saying, give me access to these properties here, the first name, the last name, the gender, the age, whatever. So we can just access it directly. So we can say first name. And then we no longer need user, so we can delete that. And now we have a very simple way of writing it. I know that there will be different skill levels watching this video, so I'm not going to deconstruct everything. I think it is probably easier for somebody just starting off to see that users is, all the users, and now we're getting an individual user, and so we're just going to access user dot first name. So I'm going to stick with this way of writing it, but just know that there is a more concise way to do it. Now, one other cool thing that map gives us is access to the index. So as we're looping through this array, we have access to which index we are currently on. So it is an array of 10 items, and that means that this very first item is going to have an index of 0 because arrays start at 0 index. So this is 0 here, and this is 1, and this is 2, etc. So this last one is going to be index 9, even though it's item 10, but index 9. So with that, we could turn it back to a return statement, and then above that, we can add a console.log and have index in there just to see what it gives us. And now you can see as it loops through, it's console logging what index it is on. All right, so that is the first one done. Now let's look at another way of using map. So in this one, it's asking us to add a new property to each of the array elements. And this property I'm calling currently online, and that's going to be a Boolean. So what we're trying to do here is for each of these items in the array, we're wanting to add on programmatically something like currently online. And then we're going to want it to say true here. But we're going to want to do that for all of them. So let's look at how we would do that. I'm going to comment this out just so that it's a little less distracting for you. And let's figure out how we can add a property. So just like before, we know it's going to return a new array. So let's say const currently online. And this variable will hold the new array that the map returns. So we can say is equal to users.map. And we know that we're going to have access to an individual user here. Let's do an arrow function and let's open it up. Now we need a full return because this is definitely not going to be a one-liner. So let's do a return. And we're going to have to return an object. So this returned object here is essentially going to be one of these objects here. So we need to have all of these properties in that object, and then we're going to add on that currently online one. So the best way to do that is by spreading user. So by saying ... or spread and then user, we're essentially grabbing this entire object right here, or not this one specifically, but the one that we're looping over, and we're just putting it right there. So then all we have to do is add on currently online, and we're going to say, let's say true. Now let's console.log currently online and save, and let's explore. So Mark, he's got currently online true. Constantine, currently online, perfect. So everyone now has currently online true, but we can make this a little better. And so let's do math.random is less than 0.5. So for those that don't know, math.random just by itself is going to return a number between 0 and 1. So every time we call math.random, we're going to get a new number. And then by adding on this lesser than 0.5, we're essentially giving it a 50% chance to be true or false, because this expression here results in a true or false statement. So if we get this and we console log it, we can see it's true this time, however, maybe false the next, and true, and true, and true, but now false. So this is just an easy way of giving a 50-50 chance to being either true or false. So let's save now. And in the array, Mark is currently on line true. However, Constantine is now false. And that'll be the same for everyone. Everyone will have just a different one. So you can see false here and true here. All right, up next we have filter. So the filter method creates a new array with elements that pass a given condition. So unlike map, filter's new array will not necessarily equal the same length as the original array. So just like before, we know that we're going to get a new array. So let's say const females only is equal to users.filter. And just like with map, we get access to an individual user in the callback function. So user here, this is the callback function. And now we can say user.gender is equal to female. So this here is the condition that I was talking about. This is the checkpoint for the filter. So any of the users that get through this condition here will be put into the new array. And anything that doesn't meet this condition will not be in the new array. So let's console.log females only. And now we have an array of 4 rather than 10. And in each of them, we've got Sharia, which female, 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 and female. So that works. Next up, we have only show users between 30 and 70. So const age filter is equal to users.filter, and again, user in the callback. And now we have user.age, because we're interested in the age, obviously. And we're only interested in users between the age of 30 and 70. So user.age, that is greater or equal to 30, and user.age is less than or equal to 70. And then let's console.log age filter. And in the second console log here, we now have 31, 61, 33, and 53. So it is cutting everyone else out. All right, now we're going to start looking at array methods that mutate the original array. So rather than returning a new array like the previous ones did, this one will now change that original array, so the user's array at the top. So the forEach method acts like a for loop, allowing you to loop over each item in the array and do something with it. So starting off easy, list everyone's age. So let's just do users.forEach. And just like before, we have access to an individual user. And let's simply console.log user.age. So essentially, we're going through that big users array. And for each user, we're going to console log the user age. Beautiful. So now we can see it all listed here. Next, add everyone's age. So for this, I would usually reach for a different tool. I would go for the reduce method, but forEach is still able to do the job. So to make this work, we're going to have to first create a variable that holds the total age number. So let's do let total age is equal to 0. After that, we're going to do users.forEach, and we're going to have access to each user, just like before. And we're going to say total age is now equal to total age plus user.age. And if we console log total age, then we will now see 485. I should really comment this out. Sorry about that. Now we have 485 here. We can clean this up just a little bit and use a shortcut. So instead of having to say total age is equal to total age plus user.age, we can instead delete this part and we can use the plus equal shortcut. And if we save, we can see that it gets the same number. All right, so finally, we have if a user is from Canada, let's capitalize their nationality. So users.forEach, and inside of here, we get access to the user and we open it up. And so for this one, we're going to do something a little special here. Just like with map, where we had access to the index, with forEach, we also have access to the index, and we have access to the original array. So if I console.log index and array, then we're going to see 0 all the way to 9 for the index, and then the whole array printed out every time. So within here, we're going to say if the user's nationality is equal to Canada, then in the array at that specific index, and this right here is just another way of saying, let's say, index of 0. So in the array at an index of 0, but we're not going to have 0 here. We want something dynamic. So we put index here so that each time we loop over and we have a new user and a new index and the same array, we want to have this array at that specific index. We are now going to set it to, just like before, let's spread the user. So now we have access, we have everything that was in the user before, except we want to change the nationality to now be user.nationality.toUpperCase. And let's console.log users. Because again, we are mutating the original array. So if I save this now, any Canadian, which I actually don't, oh, there you go, that was easy. So Sharia is from Canada, and now it says Canada in capitals. However, Constantine is from China, and that is not capitalized. So this works. All right, so up next, we have the sort method. So this sorts an array's elements in ascending order by default, and it affects the original array. In order to do the sorting, it converts the elements of the array into strings and then compares their sequences of UTF-16 code unit values. Now, I know that sounds a little insane, and it still does to me as well, but let's dig in, and by seeing examples, it'll make a bit more sense. Before trying to answer these challenge questions, we're just going to show a couple quick examples first. So we have a new array called names, and it has 4 different people in it: Ben, Alexia, David, and Catherine. And if I call names.sort, and then I console log and save, now we can see that it's alphabetically in order. So Alexia, or A, B, C, D is essentially what I was going for. Cool, so pretty simple for strings like this in a very simple case. And we're going to build up in complexity because sort is a little bit more complicated. All right, now we have another array of numbers in a random order. And if we call sort on it and console log it and save, well, we can see that this doesn't really make much sense to us. You would think it would go 1, 5, 13, 53, and then 100. However, because of that conversion that I was talking about before, where it converts each of these values to a string and then compares their sequences of UTF-16 codes, things are not working in the way that we would think. We can see here that all the ones, the numbers starting with 1 are at least grouped up, and then the 5s are grouped up. And then it's not quite length here, but instead it's going to be 1 and then zeros. Doesn't matter if it was all zeros, even if this was another one here and we saved. All of them are grouped up even as 1,000, these zeros, when it gets converted, it's still put into this order. And then a 13, which its second number is higher than a 0, it comes afterwards, etc., etc. It's kind of, it's weird, and it's not what we want. So let's look at how we would actually get what we want. So if we do numbers.sort, and then in the callback function, rather than having access to that individual number, with sort, we get access to the two that are being compared. So traditionally, we call this A and B for the two numbers or two values that are being compared. Now let's console log A and B and see what we get. So we can see here, A, even on the first line, A is actually the second number here, and B is the current one that we're on. So if we're starting at the beginning of the array, A is going to be this next value, and B is going to be the one that we're currently on. Now the trick to sorting an array of numbers is actually by doing A minus B. So with A minus B here, there's essentially three possibilities. Either the result is going to be less than 0, in which case A gets the priority, or it's going to be greater than 0, in which case B gets the priority, or they're going to equal the same and it'll equal 0, in which case nothing changes. So if we console log this again and save, now we can see that the correct order is given. So this is essentially the little trick, let's call it, for ordering or sorting numbers. So now that we know this, we can now move on to trying it with the real user data up above. So I'm going to quickly comment this out, and we're going to do users.sort. We know that we'll have A and B here in the callback function, and then we can do A.age minus B.age, because where before we just had an array of numbers, with users, we have an array of objects, meaning we're going to have to do the dot notation to get the age itself. And now if I console log users, we can see that the order is, well, it's ascending. So age 7, age 22, age 24, but we want descending. So in order to do that, all we have to do is just simply switch the A and the B. And we save, and now magically, we have descending order. So 92, 88, 74. Looks good to me. All right, so for the next challenge, we have to sort by first names alphabetically. So the A minus B trick only works for numbers. For letters, we need to use another trick. And I use the word trick very loosely. There's of course logic behind it, but let's just go with it. It's a little trick. So with this, just like before, there's really three possibilities. There's lesser than, there's greater than, or they're equal to. So let's start writing it out. So users.sort A, B, just like before, and we're going to return. And now here we have these three possibilities. So if A.firstname is less than B.firstname, what we're going to want to do here is return something negative if the first argument is less than the second. So it should be placed before the second item in the resulting array. So we can just simply return -1 because we need something negative. Now in the next one, and I'm just going to duplicate this down, we're going to have it so that it's greater than. And here, we need to return something positive. So we can just do return 1 here. And finally, we can do equal to, and we'll return 0. Now, if I console.log users and save, again, we are trying to sort the names, first names, alphabetically. So we can see right here, Birdie, Cobb, Corabella, so BCCKMN looks good to me. There's a small improvement that we can do here. and that is the way that JavaScript handles returns. So if this condition here is true, then we return this -1. And as soon as this -1 is returned, everything that comes afterwards is ignored and it isn't run. And if this statement is not true, then obviously we go on to the next line. So for this last part, instead of having this whole block here, what we can just do is return 0. So that essentially means it'll run this code here. Okay, no, that's not true. It'll run this code here. Nope, this isn't true. Nothing happens. At this return, it doesn't happen. And then finally, it'll just default to the 0, which is the third option. And if I save, we go back in, we can see that everything still lines up properly alphabetically. All right, so we're finished with the array methods that mutate the original array. Now we're going to look at some of the array methods that return true or false. So that is includes, sum, and every. So the includes method determines whether an array includes a certain value. And if it does, then it returns true, and if it doesn't, then it returns false. Now, unlike a lot of the other methods that we've looked at so far, includes doesn't take a callback function, but instead it just does a generic sort of triple equal to comparison on every element under the hood, that is, and it will return true if at least one of the items in the array is equal to that value. So what does that mean? Well, let's try const found, just because we need a value for the true or false that it's going to return. It's equal to names.includes, and then let's try Alexia like this. And let's console.log found. And when we save, we can see that it's true because Alexia is in there. But if we change Alexia to Alexia and we save, now it's false. So this type of comparison is good for primitive data types like Boolean or numbers or strings, because under the hood, like I said, it uses a generic triple equal to comparison. So it's basically looping through each of these elements, and for each one of them, it's saying, does this value here, does that equal to Alexia? And it's saying, is this? No. Okay, let's move on to the next. Is this? Yes, this is true. So that's basically what's going on here. However, it doesn't work for complex objects. So we cannot do something like, let's scroll to the top and let's grab this first person, this user here. I'm going to copy him. We're going to go back down and we're going to say const person of interest. And we're going to equal to that object that we just grabbed. And I'm just going to quickly comment this out. So we cannot say const found is equal to users, meaning that, the big array at the top, dot includes person of interest. And if I grab this console log and a console log here and I save, we can see that it says false, even though we know that this object is in this users array. So why is that? Well, it is because when we compare objects, the interpreter, the JavaScript interpreter, will test whether they point to the same object in memory. And since we are creating this variable right here, it's definitely not the same reference in memory to that array at the top. So if we're wanting to do this kind of comparison, we have to use the sum method. All right, so the sum method checks to see if some of the elements match the given condition, returning true or false. It takes a callback function where you can write your own logic to determine if an array contains some element which matches that condition that you wrote. So here are the challenges. Is anyone over the age of 90? Let's give it a try. So const over 90, and this is just going to hold our Boolean value, is equal to users.sum, and then again, callback. So we have access to user, the individual user that's being looped over. And we can say, is that users.age, is it greater than 90? So again, is anyone over the age of 90? And let's console.log over 90. And let's save. And we can say, we see it's true. So someone is over the age of 90. However, if we scroll to the top, I think the oldest person in here is 92. So if we go back down and we say, is anyone over the age of 92? And I save now. Now we're going to get false because we're asking, is anyone greater than, not greater or equal. So if I did that, then that's going to be true, but just greater than. So 92, false. Perfect. So up next, is there at least one user from Canada? So const anyone Canadian is equal to users.sum user arrow function, just like always. And let's say user dot nationality is equal to Canada. And then let's console.log anyone Canadian. Let's save and true. Yes, because there is, I think there is two from Canada. Yeah, 2 people from Canada. So that's how sum works. Now, similar to the sum method, the every method checks to see if every element in the array matches a given condition, again, returning true or false. So is everyone over the age of 10? So const over, or let's say all over 10 is equal to users.every. We have access to the user now. And then user.age is greater than 10. Is everyone over the age of 10? And let's console.log all over 10. And save. And users here. Perfect. Now let's save, and we have false because I think the youngest person is 7. So let's go down here. So if 7 is the youngest, let's say, is everyone over the age of 6? And it's true. And then of course, as I go to 7, now it's going back to false because we're looking at only greater, not greater and equal. All right, beautiful. So next, are all users Canadian? This one should be pretty easy at this point. So const all Canadian is equal to users.every. And then we've got user, and we've got user.nationality, because that's what we're interested in, obviously, is triple equal to Canada. And then let's console.log all Canadian. And save. False. No, because not everyone is from Canada. We have Mark, which is a very traditional Indian name, Constantine, traditional Chinese name, etc., etc. All right, so we are on to the final section of method types. And these are the ones that return something special. They don't actually return something special. It's just that these ones, reduce and find, they do something that didn't really fit into the other categories. And so they're very special. So the reduce method gives you a simple way to take an array of values and reduce it or squash them into a single value. Now with reduce, there are 3 different concepts that you need to be aware of. The first is called an accumulator, and the accumulator returns whatever the previous value that was returned. Or on its first loop through, it returns whatever the initial value was set to. So when we look at the forEach example, wherever it is, forEach right here, and we were trying to calculate someone's age, or add everyone's ages up, sorry, we had to make this variable here, this let total age equal to 0. This is essentially what the accumulator is. It's essentially a little bit of state or memory for us to work with. So that's the accumulator. Next, we have current, which is the current element that is being looped over. And finally, we have the initial value. So those are the 3. So accumulator, current, and initial value. So let's try and answer this challenge here, where we're combining the age of all users, but let's do it with reduce instead of forEach this time. So const combined age is equal to users.reduce, And in the callback function, we get access to that accumulator and the current. And often you'll see it written like this, with accumulator as ACC and current value as cur. So we get access to those two in the callback function. And then from there, we can do a little bit of logic. So ACC, so the accumulator, plus the current element that we're looping through, dot age, because we're wanting to get the age of that. Now, if I console log combined age and save, you can see that we're getting something kind of crazy. And that is because we never set that initial value that I was telling you about. So at the end of a reduce, right before it closes, you're going to see a little comma, and then you're going to see some initial value. And for us, since we're dealing with age, we're going to set it to 0. And when I save now, we get something that makes a little bit more sense. So 485, which is the same that we got before. So again, let's just break it down. So we've got the combined age, or the value that all of this is going to return. Users, the array at the top, we're going to dot reduce over it. In the callback function, the first parameter is always the accumulator, and the second one is the current. So from there, again, the accumulator here is the same actually as the initial value. This initial value becomes the accumulator. So essentially, the accumulator, which is 0 at this point, 0 plus current age. So for the first user, the cur, whatever that age is, let's say it's 2. Now the value here, the accumulator, is 2. And then the next user that we loop over, let's say her age is 3. And so now we have 2 here as the accumulator plus this current.age, and that would be 3. So now this total value, the accumulator, is now 5. And it would just loop through however many elements there are in an array, and it'll give you the final output. It will condense or squash it down to a single value. All right, so up next we've got get total number of users by nationality. So where before we were just doing a simple count on a number, for this example, we are going to loop over the array and we're going to reduce or squash it down to a single object that contains all of the different nationalities and the count that it has. So I think we said before, there are 2 Canadians and 1 person from India, etc. So what we want is an object that contains all the nationalities and how many are in each of them. So let's do const nationality count is equal to users.reduce. And of course, just like before, we've got the accumulator and the current in the callback. And then let's open it up because this is definitely not going to be a one-liner. And we're going to create some logic here that basically says, as you're looping over this array, if that nationality already exists, then let's do a +1 on that. And if it doesn't already exist, then let's set it to 1. So let's do an if statement. And if the accumulator, so the number that we're tracking, the little bit of state that we have, at the cur.nationality, so this is essentially saying in the accumulator, in the final output that we're going through, does the current.nationality, and this is essentially a string, so this would be Canada, let's say. So in the accumulator, if Canada exists, then we're going to do accumulator.cur.nationality. And again, I'm going to switch this just so we don't get lost here. This Canada, it's meant to be dynamic, obviously, so we're going to have cur.nationality. So if this nationality already exists in the accumulator, then we want to set it to that same nationality +1. So this covers the case on if the nationality is already found in the accumulator. Otherwise, else, we want to do the accumulator. We want to create that accumulator and say current.nationality is equal to 1. And then at the end of a reduce, you want to return the accumulator. And then just like before, we need to have that initial value. And so let's set it to an empty object. I realize this might be a little bit complicated for some people. Again, if you have questions, ask it in the comments section down below, and I'll do my best to break it down for you. So console.log nationality count. And let's save. And you can see that we now have an object that has a count for all the different nationalities that there are. And we can actually improve this line right here by simply saying ++, which is a shortcut for add one. If we save, we get the same thing. So this is how we would loop through an array and reduce it or squash it down to a single value where we're really just interested on that nationality. Now I'm going to blow your mind a little bit, and we're going to have a bonus question where we're looking at reducing multiple properties. So get the total number of calories, carbs, and fat of this entire meals array. So you've got your breakfast, your lunch, your snack, and your dinner, and there's values for each of them. So we're essentially wanting to loop over the breakfast, the lunch, the snack, and the dinner, and we're wanting to count up all of these calories together, all these carbs, and all these fats. And you can count it yourself if you'd like, but this is what we are expecting. So rather than writing it all out, I'm just going to paste the answer here, and then we're going to go through each part of it step by step. All right, ready? Let's go. Cool. So const nutritional value is equal to meals, which is the meals array up here. We're going to dot reduce. In the callback function arguments, as always, we get access to the accumulator and the current. We then have the callback function, the guts of it. And at the end, we have that comma. And then this is where we set the initial value. So in this case, we're going to have an object which has calories, carbs, and fat, and all of them are going to be set to 0 by default. And then within the callback function, what we're saying here is the accumulator, or that object that we're building up. So in the accumulator object, the calories, which is this one here, we're going to essentially add to it with the current calories. And then the same thing down here. So this carbs here, we're going to add the carbs of the current meal that we're looping over. And the same for fat. And then just like before, we want to return the accumulator so that the next time it loops over, it uses that updated value. And if we save, we get, just like we would expect, 1900, 90, and 50. So that's how you reduce multiple properties. So the find array method returns the first item in the array that returns true for the condition you set. So it will loop through an array, and if that specific item or object in our case, because it's an array of objects, so if that object matches a certain condition, then it will return that object, that first one that it finds that matches it. And if nothing is found, then undefined is returned. So the first English user. Let's do const first English user is equal to users.find. And now we have a callback. So we get access to user, the individual user, and we say user.nationality is equal to everything still. And then let's console log first English user. Save. And now we get Corbella is what we should see at the top here. So England, Corbella. And I think there's maybe two English. Yes. So we don't get nerdy. We get Corbella instead. So perfect. And then the first user under the age of 30. So const first under 30 is equal to users.find user arrow function user.age, because that's what we're interested in, is less than 30. And let's console log first under 30. Let's save. And we've got Terry here, which is age 7. So that is the first person that it finds under the age of 30. Not necessarily the youngest, but just the first one that it goes through. So again, it would start at the top at index 0. Okay, age 31, age 88, 61, no, and then finally here 7. So that's why Terry is returned. However, if I get this and I cut it out, and the next one is 22, and let's add this here. So now Terry is after Corabella. Let's save. Now we can see that the first one that's found under the age of 30 is Corabella. All right, so that covers the fundamentals of array methods. If you have any questions at all, just let me know in the comment section down below, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. If you found this video helpful, I would greatly appreciate it if you drop a like, as it really helps this channel out. This video is the first in a series that I'm making on the fundamentals of JavaScript. So these are all just topics that can sometimes be a little bit trickier to understand, but you definitely need to know them. So if you are interested in this, then be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. Also, if you are working through CSS at all, then I will leave my CSS fundamentals playlist in the description down below as well. With that out of the way, thank you very much for your time. I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you in the next one.